So I think on the topic of creating an art style or finding an art style, it could definitely sound like a very beginner type question or like a very like rudimentary common sense sort of thing. But I think it's still worth answering and talking about. And if you guys have any tips about how you guys came to your art styles or anything that you're struggling with trying to come to your own art style, definitely comment below. But yeah, I'm just gonna give my 2 cents on it. And so I really think that first of all, it's probably a better idea to shift the your thought pattern from you're trying to create this art style rather than like an art style is just going to end up being the result of the way you think and the way you work, um, and the decisions that you end up making during your paintings. And so I think, like aside from that, the first big step would just be to cultivate a taste overall. You kind of have to have opinions, I suppose, whether they be like conscious or subconscious. You have to have an opinion on what you think looks good. And so you can do that by like going to art galleries, watching TV, watching movies, and like looking at certain frames of the movies, or going on Pinterest or whatever, and just going through so many different paintings or drawings or different works of art, and just saving and just keeping in your head um, the things that really speak to you. And that's kind of like, of course, common sense, and you're going to be doing that anyways. Um, I can almost guarantee if I tell you to think of a beautiful painting, you can pull up something. There's something you might have seen in like a history class or something you've seen online or another artist you've seen on Instagram or YouTube. But the overall idea is just to like have just you have to have an opinion. So you can start forming that opinion by just finding out what you like. That's the first step I would say. Um, the second thing is that I think it's really common. I know at least for myself this is how it went, but I think it's very common to start off essentially by just copying someone else. So for the longest time, I'm not gonna say the longest time, maybe like the first 2 years, I would say, maybe 3 years of my painting process or journey, I was just straight up copying people. Um, I've spoken about this before, but initially I was really interested in this artist from Singapore, I believe, named Teo Chi, and he actually posts on YouTube, so maybe I'll link him below. But yeah, I was really obsessed with his art style, and so that's really what I was pushing for. Um, and then along came James Gurney, and that was a big staple of my like art learning because he's such a great teacher. So yeah, for the long time I was just essentially copying them, and not even in like a tasteful like master study kind of way, but literally in like a how do I make my art look as close to this person as possible. And I never came very close, but the attempts definitely helped me learn a lot about painting. And so I would say don't feel bad if you're just copying someone else's art for a little bit. I think that's I honestly kind of think that might just be how it works. Um, Even if you were to go to an art school, say, or if you were to like apprentice under an artist, if that even still exists today, you would likely just be taking from that person. You would learn how they paint, and you would go ahead and apply it on your own paintings. And so there'd be a lot of crossover with how their paintings look and how your paintings look. So don't be ashamed if you're still sort of copying. That's kind of I think natural. But ultimately, I think your style is going to be about your decisions and your taste. So some of those decisions are like, how long are you going to spend on your paintings? I've kind of gotten into the habit of only painting for like an hour, maybe two, at least on these little small sketches. And so that informs a lot about how my style ends up looking. What art supply are you going to be using? Of course, I've been using gouache for the past like 4 years, I believe. So a lot, like a whole lot of the way my art looks is influenced by that. Color, of course, the types of colors I choose. I think I've kind of gotten into the habit of this ultramarine blue thing. Trying to work in more colors like purples and all that kind of stuff. But of course, the way my mind thinks about color is going to be a huge point in creating a style. So these are just some things to think about. Like there's tons of different decisions, like how realistic you want to paint, or like what kind of brushes you use. All this stuff comes into play, and I think it's just helpful to maybe slow down on thinking the idea of like I want my art to look like this, and just really focus on the back end stuff of like what supplies do I want to be using, how much time do I want to spend on my paintings, where do I want to be painting? Do I want to paint outside or inside? All that stuff ultimately comes together. Um, but yeah, I would say don't stress too much because your style is just more so a result of all these little decisions.